హలో ఫ్రెండ్స్, వెల్కమ్ టు మనీ పర్స్. లెట్స్ లెర్న్ సంథింగ్ న్యూ టుడే. ఫస్ట్ పార్ట్లోని మనం ఫార్మా అండ్ హెల్త్ ఇన్సూరెన్స్ సెక్టర్లో ఉన్న ఆపర్చునిటీని ఆదిత్య ఖెమ్కా గారిని అడిగి తెలుసుకున్నాం కదా. ఈ వీడియోలోని హాస్పిటల్స్, డయాగ్నోస్టిక్ సెంటర్స్, అలాగే ఏ టైప్ ఆఫ్ ఫార్మా స్టాక్స్ మీద ఆయన పాజిటివ్గా ఉన్నారో అడిగి తెలుసుకుందాం. అండ్ మీరు ఈ వీడియోకి డైరెక్ట్గా వచ్చినట్టయితే ఫస్ట్ పార్ట్ యొక్క వీడియో లింక్ ఇక్కడ ఐ బటన్లో కానీ లేదా వీడియో చివరిలో ఎండ్ కార్డ్స్లో కానీ ఉంటుంది. మీరు ఈ వీడియో అయిపోయిన తర్వాత చూడండి. అలాగే ఫార్మా సెక్టర్ మీద కొన్ని ఎడిషనల్ క్వశ్చన్స్ కూడా ఆదిత్య ఖెమ్కా గారిని అడిగాను. మీలో ఎవరికైనా ఇంట్రెస్ట్ ఉన్నట్టయితే అవి బోనస్ డిస్కషన్స్ కింద ఈ వీడియో చివరిలో అప్లోడ్ చేస్తాను, వాటిని చూడండి. మనం ముందుగా హాస్పిటల్ సెక్టర్తో స్టార్ట్ చేద్దాం. గవర్నమెంట్ రిలీజ్ చేసిన డేటా ప్రకారం చూసినట్టయితే మన దగ్గర ఉన్న టోటల్ హాస్పిటల్స్లోని 74% హాస్పిటల్స్ గవర్నమెంట్ హాస్పిటల్స్ అయితే 26% హాస్పిటల్స్ ప్రైవేట్ హాస్పిటల్స్. కానీ పేషెంట్స్ విజిట్స్ అండ్ బెడ్స్ పరంగా చూసినట్టయితే 60% షేర్ ప్రైవేట్ హాస్పిటల్స్ ఉన్నట్టయితే 40% షేర్ గవర్నమెంట్ హాస్పిటల్స్ ఉన్నది. ఇది 2015 డేటా. ఇప్పటికి ఇంకా యాక్చువల్లీ ప్రైవేట్ హాస్పిటల్స్ షేర్ ఇంకా బాగా పెరిగిపోయి ఉంటుంది. దీనికి మేజర్ కారణం ఒకటి క్వాలిటీ ఆఫ్ ట్రీట్మెంట్ అయితే, సెకండ్ ఇన్సూరెన్స్ పెనిట్రేషన్ కూడా. హెల్త్ ఇన్సూరెన్స్ పెనిట్రేషన్ పెరిగే కొద్దీ జనాల దగ్గర ప్రైవేట్ హాస్పిటల్స్లో ట్రీట్మెంట్ చేయించుకుని అఫోర్డబిలిటీ పెరుగుతుంది. అలాగే గవర్నమెంట్ రన్ చేసే స్కీమ్స్ ద్వారా అయితే ఇంకా ఎక్కువ పెరుగుతుంది. ఇంకా ఎక్కువ మంది జనాలు ప్రైవేట్ హాస్పిటల్లో ట్రీట్మెంట్ చేయించుకోగలరు. మన తెలుగు స్టేట్స్లో కూడా చూసాం. ఆరోగ్యశ్రీ లాంచ్ చేయకముందు ఎలా ఉండేది, ఆరోగ్యశ్రీ లాంచ్ చేసిన తర్వాత ఎంతమంది జనాలు ప్రైవేట్ హాస్పిటల్స్కి వెళ్ళి ట్రీట్మెంట్ చేయించుకుని అఫోర్డబిలిటీ పెరిగింది. అండ్ హాస్పిటల్స్ ఎలా డెవలప్ అయ్యాయో కూడా. మన సెంట్రల్ గవర్నమెంట్ కూడా గవర్నమెంట్ స్పాన్సర్డ్ హెల్త్ ఇన్సూరెన్స్ స్కీమ్ ఒకటి లాంచ్ చేసింది, ఆయుష్మాన్ భారత్ అని చెప్పి. ఈ ఆయుష్మాన్ భారత్ స్కీమ్ ద్వారా 10 కోట్ల ఫ్యామిలీస్కి 5 లక్షల రూపాయల కవరేజ్ వరకు ఆఫర్ చేస్తామని చెప్పి గవర్నమెంట్ చెప్తుందన్నమాట. ఈ స్కీమ్ లాంచ్ చేసి ఆల్రెడీ కొంచెం టైం అవుతుంది. సో ఈ స్కీమ్ ఎంతవరకు యాక్సెప్టబిలిటీ ఉన్నది అండ్ హాస్పిటల్స్కి ఈ స్కీమ్ ద్వారా ఎలా బెనిఫిట్ అవుతుందో మనం ఆదిత్య ఖెమ్కా గారిని అడిగి తెలుసుకుందాం.
So to give you some data points, right? So let's say if there are 100 hospitals in India, 70 of those hospitals are owned by the government. There are only 30 private hospitals and 70 government hospitals. But in terms of the patient population, 80% of the patient population goes to the private hospitals and only 20% of the patient population goes to the government hospitals. So therefore, it's safe to say that private hospitals are considered gold standard caregivers and public hospitals are not considered that good by the wider Indian population. Now, if you ask any hospital today, any hospital chain as to what is the total population in India that can afford any form of healthcare, any form of hospital, then the answer that I get generally is about anywhere between 10 to 20 crore Indians. Out of 130 crore Indians, 10 to 20 crore Indians can actually afford any form of healthcare.
Okay.
So let's say that number is 15 crores for now.
Okay.
So 15 crore Indians can afford any form of healthcare. Now the Ayushman Bharat program, so the program is supposed to give health insurance to 10 crore families.
Yeah.
The average size of an Indian family is 4.5 people.
Okay.
So you have 45 crore individuals who will suddenly have the purchasing power to use healthcare services.
Okay.
So your target audience, if you're a hospital chain, your target audience suddenly goes up from 15 crores to 60 crores because 45 additional crore people get healthcare insurance. Now, will this happen over just 1 year? Probably not. This will take maybe 5 or 10 years to, for the government to streamline the system, decide the package rates, etc., etc. But the point is that if your volume explodes like that, even if it comes at a lower price point, which it probably will, because government is a single point purchaser here, right? So if you're a single point purchaser, you'll bargain hard in terms of prices. But still, if you get that kind of volumes, even at reasonable prices or lower prices than what you're currently charging, the profit growth can be enormous because you get a lot of volume and with your existing infrastructure, you don't have to build separate infrastructure. So whatever utilization levels hospitals are at, those utilization levels can dramatically improve because of patients coming from Ayushman Bharat. So that thesis so far has played out again. So Ayushman Bharat for me is a more 5-year perspective story. It's not really a 1 year, 6 month story.
Okay.
So when we speak to hospitals today, some of them have started doing some Ayushman Bharat procedures, but not in a very meaningful manner.
Okay.
Simply because the rates that the government is currently providing, those rates are not really very reasonable for these hospitals to even entertain those patients.
Okay.
So they are negotiating with the government for a better rate. As and when the government comes out with a better rate, these hospitals will benefit from that.
Okay.
But the larger benefit of Ayushman Bharat actually goes to diagnostic chains and pharma companies. Because in hospitals, government has its own infrastructure and government can threaten that, if you private hospitals don't entertain my patients, my infrastructure will use those patients.
True.
But in diagnostics or pharma, government doesn't have its own infrastructure. So all the volume has to go to private diagnostic labs and private pharmaceutical players. So which is where the opportunity lies really. So hospitals will benefit eventually, but the primary and the first beneficiaries will actually be the diagnostic chains and pharma companies. So that's how Ayushman Bharat will play out.
ఆయన ఏమన్నారంటే ఈ ఆయుష్మాన్ భారత్ స్కీమ్ ద్వారా 43 కోట్ల జనాభాకి హెల్త్ ఇన్సూరెన్స్ దొరుకుతుంది. కానీ ప్రజెంట్ గవర్నమెంట్ ఈ ఆయుష్మాన్ భారత్ స్కీమ్లో కోట్ చేసే రేట్స్ ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో అవి రీజనబుల్గా లేకపోవడం వల్ల చాలా హాస్పిటల్స్ యాక్సెప్ట్ చేయట్లేదు. ఒక్కసారి గవర్నమెంట్ రీజనబుల్ రేట్స్ని కోట్ చేయడం ప్రారంభిస్తే, హాస్పిటల్స్ యాక్సెప్ట్ చేయడం ప్రారంభిస్తే అప్పుడు ఆయుష్మాన్ భారత్ పేషెంట్స్ కూడా హాస్పిటల్స్కి ఎక్కువ మంది వెళ్తారు. సేమ్ ఇన్ఫ్రాస్ట్రక్చర్తో నెంబర్ ఆఫ్ పేషెంట్స్ పెరుగుతారు కాబట్టి హాస్పిటల్స్ ప్రాఫిటబిలిటీ పెరుగుతుందని చెప్పారు. అలాగే ఆయన ఇంకేమన్నారంటే ఈ ఆయుష్మాన్ భారత్ స్కీమ్ ద్వారా హాస్పిటల్స్ కన్నా కూడా డయాగ్నోస్టిక్ సెంటర్స్కి, ఫార్మస్యూటికల్ కంపెనీస్కి ఎక్కువ లాభం చేకూరుతుంది అని చెప్పారన్నమాట. ఎలాగే డయాగ్నోస్టిక్ సెంటర్స్ టాపిక్ వచ్చింది కాబట్టి డయాగ్నోస్టిక్ సెంటర్ బిజినెస్ మీద నాకున్న ఒక డౌట్ ఆయన అడిగారు.
Aditya, I was reading an article. It was saying many small tests like blood pressure, heartbeat, and all this stuff. In future, technology will take over and it can be done with portable devices.
True.
And this could be a bigger challenge for diagnostics business.
Right.
So I just want your view on that. And apart from that, when we see diagnostics market, it is more of a unorganized market. It is driven by unorganized market. How is this organized players are taking over market share and setting up their entities or tying up with the hospitals? Because mostly when we see diagnostic business, it is attached business to a doctor.
Right.
A doctor recommends a diagnostic center and patient goes there.
True.
So is the organized players are getting into that game, and how do you see that?
Right. So firstly on the portable devices, right?
Okay.
So these portable devices for diagnostic tests are not currently reasonably priced.
Okay.
So there are some already available, right? So glucose meters are available. You can test your sugar levels from that strip, and you can get it. But the point is that the device itself is expensive. Moreover, if I am a diabetic, I may want to have that device and may want to check my blood sugar levels every day. But the point is that I get an insulin, I take the insulin, my doctor keeps checking me. So in that case, I don't really need the device.
Okay.
So what will happen eventually in the diagnostic portable devices market is that eventually you will have some very reasonably priced low-end products which a common Indian could be able to afford.
Okay.
But that would not harm the revenues of diagnostics because diagnostics give you much more information rather than just your blood glucose levels, right?
Okay.
So there's a lot of things that diagnostic companies do, a lot more data that you get from a diagnostic test that you may not be able to get from a portable device.
True.
Some of the very routine tests like a blood sugar test or something or a blood pressure test for instance, you already have a portable device that can do blood pressure test, right? So some of these things you can get at home, but you don't go to diagnostic labs to get your blood sugar or blood pressure only. You go for so many other things for which currently there are no portable devices available. 10-20 years down the road, who knows? Some technology might come and disrupt the sector, but today we don't see anything in the foreseeable future that can disrupt the segment. On the organized to unorganized things, so you're absolutely right. A larger part of our diagnostic market is completely unorganized. But we have the organized players who are growing faster than the market. So all the diagnostic players that are listed currently, they are all showing growth rates which is faster than the growth rate of the industry per se. So they are gaining market share for sure. The Doctor Connect, as you mentioned, is important, and all these listed players have that Doctor Connect, the brand recall.
Okay.
So at the one end, you have the doctor recommending the lab to the patient. On the other hand, there are a bunch of tests where we go ourselves. No doctor recommends it to us. For instance, our annual health checkup. So no doctor recommends which lab to go to. We go ourselves, and that is where the brand image matters a lot. So if you are a Dr. Lal, if you are a SRL, if you are a Thyrocare, there is a certain amount of brand recall that the patient has, and therefore he chooses those labs because of those brand recalls. So I think the diagnostic space will continue to grow in India overall as a sector. Within the sector, organized will grow faster than the unorganized for multiple reasons, including brand recall, direct patient connect, and then also the doctor connect, because the doctor network is also very, very wide, and they do a lot of promotion activities with the doctors. They educate the doctors, and doctors also see, end of the day, when it comes to health, nobody wants to take a chance with the quality of the data that they are getting, right?
True.
So you want the best quality data. Even if you have to pay 50 rupees more or 100 rupees more, you'll probably pay that, but you would get the right data. So I think the organized sector has that quality assurance attached to it, which the unorganized sector doesn't really have. And that is where I think that sector will continue to grow very well.
నా నెక్స్ట్ క్వశ్చన్ ఆయన ఏమడిగానంటే 2015 నుంచి చూసినట్టయితే టోటల్ ఫార్మా స్టాక్స్లో కొన్ని ఫార్మా స్టాక్స్ బాగా పడిపోయినట్టయితే కొన్ని ఫార్మా స్టాక్స్ ప్రైసెస్ మాత్రం బాగా పెరిగాయి. ఎందుకు ఇలాగా కొన్ని స్టాక్స్ పడ్డాయి, కొన్ని స్టాక్స్ ఎందుకు పెరిగాయి, అండ్ ఫ్యూచర్లో ఏ టైప్ ఆఫ్ స్టాక్స్ పెరగబోతున్నాయి అని అడిగినట్టయితే ఆయన ఆన్సర్ ఏం చెప్పారంటే,
So if you look at the 2009 to 15 era, when the entire pharma sector went through an upcycle, the majority contributor to that upcycle was the export market, where the pricing of the products really went up. And 2015 to 19, when the sector declined, the decline also came from the export market, where the pricing in the export market came down. But the Indian market, the domestic business, has always been very consistent and stable.
Okay.
So the stocks which have done well in the last 4 years are majority of those stocks who have a very big lion's share of their revenue and profit coming from the domestic market. Because they haven't got disrupted, because they don't have enough export business to get disrupted.
Okay.
So that is why, in terms of fund flow, what has happened is investors who had money in stocks which had very high export exposure, they realized that that export exposure is not working out well. They took out money from those stocks, and they probably invested in these stocks which had very high Indian exposure.
Okay.
And that money flow led to a re-rating in these stocks. So if you look at the stocks that you mentioned, which have done very well in the past 4-5 years, their profits may have just doubled in the last 5 years, which is just a 15% CAGR, which is what the domestic market will normally give you. But their stocks have gone up 4-5 times. So their PE multiple has gone up multiple times.
Okay.
And the reason for that is just the fund flow from one part of the sector to the other part of the sector.
Okay.
And what can potentially happen in future is, as your export market stabilizes and starts giving you profit all over again, money from this bucket can again start flowing to go back to the bucket where the exports have started doing well. Because then that investors will realize that India business is fine, but export is now growing. So then the India business money can also go to the export business. So this dynamic did play out from 2015 to 19. What may happen from 19 to 25 is probably the other way around.
ఆయన చెప్పిన ఆన్సర్ ఒక లైన్లో చెప్పాలంటే 2015 నుంచి ఎక్స్పోర్ట్స్ మార్కెట్లో ప్రాబ్లం ఉన్నది కాబట్టి మోస్ట్లీ డొమెస్టిక్ ఫోకస్డ్ కంపెనీస్ ఏవైతే ఉంటాయో వీటిని మనీ చేస్ చేయడం వల్ల ఈ కంపెనీస్ యొక్క స్టాక్ ప్రైసెస్ బాగా పెరిగాయి. వెరస్ ఇప్పుడు ఎక్స్పోర్ట్స్ మార్కెట్ ఎప్పుడైతే రికవర్ అవుతుందో డొమెస్టిక్ ప్లస్ ఎక్స్పోర్ట్స్ మార్కెట్ మీద ఫోకస్డ్ ఉన్న కంపెనీస్ ఏవైతే ఉంటాయో ఈ కంపెనీస్ని మనీ ఇప్పుడు చేస్ చేయడం స్టార్ట్ అవుతుంది. సో దీంతో ఈ టైప్ ఆఫ్ ఫార్మా కంపెనీస్ యొక్క స్టాక్ ప్రైసెస్ బాగా పెరిగే ఛాన్సెస్ ఉన్నాయని చెప్పి ఆయన చెప్పారు. నా నెక్స్ట్ క్వశ్చన్ ఆయన ఏమడిగానంటే, ఆయన కరెంట్లీ మేనేజ్ చేస్తున్న హెల్త్ కేర్ ఫండ్లో పియర్ గ్రూప్ హెల్త్ కేర్ ఫండ్స్తో కంపేర్ చేసి చూసినట్టయితే ఈయన మిడ్ అండ్ స్మాల్ క్యాప్ ఫార్మా అండ్ హెల్త్ కేర్ స్టాక్స్లో ఎక్కువ ఎలొకేషన్ ఇచ్చారన్నమాట. ఎందుకలా మిడ్ అండ్ స్మాల్ క్యాప్ ఫార్మా స్టాక్స్లో ఎక్కువ ఎలొకేషన్ తీసుకున్నారో ఆయన అడిగాను. ఆయన దానికి ఆన్సర్ ఏం చెప్పారు ఇప్పుడు చూద్దాం.
Right. So 2-3 things there. One, if you look at the performance data for the last 4-5 years, there has been certain polarization in valuations. So all the large caps and premium companies have gone to a level of valuation where you find it difficult to justify an investment, and all the small and mid cap stocks within pharma and outside pharma have actually come to valuations where you find it hard to justify a downside to yourself. So there is a margin of safety involved in that sector. So that's one. The valuations were far more reasonable in the small and mid cap versus the larger caps. They are still far more reasonable. Secondly, if you look at the investments that the larger caps have made, so the larger companies have made investments when the US market was at its peak. So they have made very, very expensive investments which are not paying off. So there is a drag on the P&L and there is a drag on the balance sheet. But the smaller companies never had the money to make such high investments. So they are relatively in healthier conditions when it comes to the P&L and balance sheet. That's second. And thirdly, the FDA problem, as we spoke about. So FDA problem is happening more in the larger companies because of the structure, the complexity of the plants that they are running, whereas the smaller companies aren't facing as many problems because the plants are relatively simpler. And also one more point on the product market. So where the larger companies are focusing more on complex generics, where there are so many uncertainties about the plant, approval, clinical trial data, cost of investment. And the smaller companies are doing the normal products where supply is shrinking and you have no issue with the data and quicker approvals from the FDA. So as I said, stars seem to be sort of aligned for the smaller and mid cap companies, and the larger cap companies have a rough road ahead of them simply because of the variables involved.
ఆయన ఏం చెప్తున్నారంటే, వాల్యుయేషన్ పరంగా లార్జ్ క్యాప్ ఫార్మా స్టాక్స్తో కంపేర్ చేస్తే మిడ్ అండ్ స్మాల్ క్యాప్ ఫార్మా స్టాక్స్ ఎప్పుడైతే బాగా కరెక్ట్ అయ్యో వాల్యుయేషన్స్ అట్రాక్టివ్గా ఉండడం, అలాగే రిస్క్ రివార్డ్ వైజ్ ఫేవరబుల్గా ఉండడంతో ఆయన మిడ్ అండ్ స్మాల్ క్యాప్ ఫార్మా స్టాక్స్లో ఎక్కువ ఎలొకేషన్ తీసుకున్నారని చెప్తున్నారు. నా నెక్స్ట్ క్వశ్చన్ ఆయన ఏమడిగానంటే, ఆయన కరెంట్లీ మేనేజ్ చేస్తున్న హెల్త్ కేర్ ఫండ్ ఏదైతే ఉందో ఇందులోని యూఎస్లో ఉన్న డయాగ్నోస్టిక్స్ కంపెనీలో 6% ఎలొకేషన్ తీసుకున్నారు. సో అలా ఎందుకు ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేశారు అండ్ యూఎస్లో ఉన్న ఫార్మా కంపెనీస్లో ఎంతవరకు ఎలొకేషన్ తీసుకుంటారో అని అడిగాను. దానికి ఆయన ఆన్సర్ ఏం చెప్పారు ఇప్పుడు చూద్దాం.
So firstly on the pharma part of the fund, so currently we have about 6% of the fund deployed into US stocks. SEBI allows us to go to a maximum of 25%. We can't go above that. But my sense is we will be very, very slow in that. We'll increase the percentage, but we'll increase it very slowly, not in a hurry. Simple reason being, US markets have a lot of other variables which are currently not very sure. The elections are coming up, and the entire trade war with China. These are all variables which can cause disruption in the market that we're trying to invest in. So we are being very cautious on that side. The reason why we chose to invest in US stocks at all was that I generally like global competitive advantage. So the reason why I launched the fund, healthcare fund, in the first place was because domestic industry, India, the pharma industry has a global competitive advantage. Nobody can compete with us when it comes to the price of the drugs that we produce and the quality of it and the cost at which we produce it. Similarly, in the medical equipment or medical devices arena, US and Europe, there are two big players, and US has been the historical sort of big father of medical devices, and they have a global competitive advantage in that space. So I just thought it would be a great idea to have another piece of the healthcare sector in this fund, which would give us global competitive advantage and therefore enable shareholder wealth creation for our shareholders as well. Because these industries, they don't really have any threats. They have patents which are last 15-20 years. And Indian companies are not even trying to make medical devices.
Not even
trying because it's very high precision engineering, very high patient liabilities if you get it wrong. And it requires extreme amount of data intelligence, which I don't think at this point in time Indian companies have the capability to go about it. So I feel this is an industry in the US that can continue to grow in mid-teens very easily. And if this industry continues to grow the way we anticipate it to, there is still a lot of money to be made in that industry. And it gives a good balance to the portfolio, because your Indian stocks all may fall or all may rise at the same time due to certain issues happening in India. And if you have a US exposure, that part of your portfolio would not probably move along with the Indian portfolio. So it will give more stability and consistency to the returns to the investor rather than just an India portfolio. So that was the rationale.
మనం ఇప్పుడు ఫైనల్ అసలు మ్యాటర్లోకి వచ్చేద్దాం. ఒకవేళ ఎవరైనా హెల్త్ కేర్ సెక్టర్లో ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయాలంటే ఎంత టైం పీరియడ్ వరకు ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయాలి, అలాగే ఇప్పుడున్న మార్కెట్ కండిషన్ బట్టి లంసమ్ మోడ్లో ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయాలా లేదా ఎస్ఐపి మోడ్లో ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయడం బెటర్ అని చెప్పి ఆయన అడిగాను. దానికి ఆయన ఏం ఆన్సర్ చెప్పారో చూద్దాం.
So firstly on the holding period, right? So I generally, when I'm asked this question, my answer is that, look, this is a sector which has global competitive advantage in India. So if you look at India's economy, what are we the best at in the world? I mean, this is probably the only sector where we are best at in the world. There is no other part of our economy which you can call it best in the world, right? So, to my mind, an Indian investor should always be invested in the pharma sector in India. Because if you are going after competitive advantage and if you have it, over a period of time, it will always create wealth. So, to my mind, you should always have an investment in this sector. In terms of a reasonable period to invest in, I think, anything less than 3 years doesn't make any sense because
so clearly no to less than 3 years.
Clearly no to less than 3 years to my mind, because if you are looking at parking money for 1 year or 6 months or 2 years, it's a sectoral call. It's always higher risk, higher return. So you may not want to sort of take that call in this fund. And lastly, why should we? What percentage of the portfolio you should have in your portfolio? My response to that is that, look, if you buy any diversified portfolio, you are anyways getting 3 to 4% or 5% pharma through the diversified fund. Given that this is a sector which your country is best in, maybe you can add another 5% to that. So maybe a total of 10%, of a total wealth allocation can happen. But having said that, please remember that this is a sectoral call, and therefore the product by its very nature, the way SEBI defines it, it's a high risk, high reward product. So people with lower risk appetite may want to sort of downsize their position and not go up to entire 10. But people with a reasonable risk appetite can easily take a 10% exposure is what I feel.
Based on the current valuations, do you see lump sum mode would be better or a SIP mode?
Again, so I think it should be defined by the risk appetite of the investor. So if you are an investor who has decent risk appetite, I think right now is a good time to invest, because the valuations are reasonable, business momentum is good. At the same time, if you're a risk averse investor where you want to sort of wait and watch and slowly deploy your capital, SIP is always a better option in that perspective as well. So generally, it's a function of the risk appetite and not really so much of the valuations. Valuations in pharma are far more reasonable than they were in 2015. And
even post the rally which happened in last 3-4 months,
it's nothing. So if you see majority of pharma stocks, all the larger ones, you can count the names, all of them are down anywhere between 35 to 70% of their peak. right? Even at current prices.
True.
So I don't think pharma valuations are anywhere stretched. You have a lot of room for upside.
Okay.
Things have to fall in place for that upside to play out, and that's what we are hoping for. But yeah, the timeline there can vary from stock to stock, and which is where a portfolio approach helps. So yeah, if you have high risk appetite, maybe a current lump sum is good. But if you are a more conservative risk averse investor, then SIP is always a better option.
ఆయన చెప్పిన ఆన్సర్ మీకు అర్థమైంది అనుకుంటాను. ఒకవేళ అర్థం అన్నట్టయితే ఒక లైన్లో చెప్పాలంటే ఆయన ఏమంటున్నారంటే ఇది సెక్టోరియల్ ఫండ్ కాబట్టి 5 సంవత్సరాల కన్నా తక్కువ టైం పీరియడ్లో అయితే ఎవరు ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయకూడదు. అలాగే ఇప్పుడు మార్కెట్ కండిషన్ బట్టి చూసుకున్నట్టయితే ఎవరికైతే రిస్క్ అపెటైట్ ఎక్కువగా ఉంటుందో వాళ్ళు లంసమ్ మోడ్లో ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయడం బెటర్. రిస్క్ అపెటైట్ తక్కువగా ఉన్నట్టయితే ఎస్ఐపి మోడ్లో ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయడం బెటర్. అండ్ అలాగే పోర్ట్ఫోలియోలో 10% కన్నా మించకుండా అంటే 10% లోపలే ఎలొకేషన్ ఉండడం బెటర్ అని చెప్పి ఆయన చెప్తున్నారు. అండ్ ఇది ఆదిత్య కెమ్కా గారు కరెంట్లీ మేనేజ్ చేసే హెల్త్ కేర్ ఫండ్ యొక్క కంప్లీట్ పోర్ట్ఫోలియో. అండ్ ఎవరైనా నన్ను అడిగినా కూడా ఈ సెక్టర్ విషయం అడిగినట్టయితే నేను కూడా ఏం చెప్తానంటే ఇప్పుడు కరెంట్లీ ఉన్న ఆపర్చునిటీ బట్టి ఇది వన్ ఆఫ్ ది బెస్ట్ సెక్టర్ టు ఇన్వెస్ట్ ఫర్ లాంగ్ టర్మ్ అండి. కానీ షార్ట్ టర్మ్లో వచ్చి వాలటిలిటీని ఇగ్నోర్ చేసి లాంగ్ టర్మ్ కోసం ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయాలంటే మాత్రం డెఫినెట్గా ఎవరైనా ఆలోచించవచ్చు అన్నమాట ఈ సెక్టర్లోని.
అన్న డిఎస్పీ ఫండ్ గురించి చెప్తున్నారు. డిఎస్పీ మ్యూచువల్ ఫండ్ ఏమైనా స్పాన్సర్ చేసింది ఈ వీడియోకి?
గుడ్ క్వశ్చన్. అందరూ అడగకపోయినా కొందరైనా అడుగుతారు ఈ క్వశ్చన్. సో అందు గురించి ఆన్సర్ చేస్తున్నాను. ఈ వీడియోని డిఎస్పీ మ్యూచువల్ ఫండ్ స్పాన్సర్ చేయలేదు. అండ్ మన ఛానల్లో ఇప్పటివరకు ఎటువంటి స్పాన్సర్డ్ వీడియోస్ నేను చేయలేదు. ఒకవేళ చేసినా కూడా అప్ఫ్రంట్ వీడియో బిగినింగ్లోనే మీకు చెప్తాను. సో ఈ ఫండ్లో ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయాలో వద్దా అన్నది మీ ఇష్టం. ఫైనలీ బోనస్ డిస్కషన్స్ ప్లే చేసే ముందు ఒక విషయం చెప్తున్నాను గైస్. ఇలా ఇండస్ట్రీలో ఉన్న ఎక్స్పర్ట్స్ని తీసుకొచ్చి వీడియో రికార్డ్ చేయాలంటే అంత ఈజీ కాదు. చాలా ఎఫర్ట్స్ పెట్టాల్సి వస్తుంది అన్నమాట. మీరు ఇచ్చే లైక్స్ అండ్ షేర్స్ ద్వారా ఇలాంటి ఎఫర్ట్స్ పెట్టి ఫ్యూచర్లోనే మరికొంతమంది ఇండస్ట్రీలో ఉన్న ఎక్స్పర్ట్స్ని తీసుకురావడానికి ఎంకరేజ్మెంట్గా ఉంటుంది. సో ఈ వీడియోలో మేము ఏదైతే ఎఫర్ట్స్ పెట్టామో అవి మీకు హెల్ప్ అవుతాయి అనిపించినట్టయితే ఈ వీడియోకి మాక్సిమం లైక్స్ అండ్ షేర్స్ ఇస్తారని కోరుకుంటున్నాను. ఇప్పుడు ఫార్మా సెక్టర్లో బోనస్ డిస్కషన్స్ చూడండి.
In our last conversation, you were saying majority of our pharma companies are focusing on the complex market or specialized products, whereas generic market actually when we look at it, because earlier the margins were low, the focus here has come down. Due to this, the supply has come down, and there could be a bigger opportunity here. Is that playing out, and can you please elaborate that opportunity for our viewers?
I'll do that
so they'll understand it better.
Perfect. So most of the Indian companies, the larger ones especially, they talk about complex generics a lot, and they're spending a lot of R&D dollars in complex generics. The situation there is that complex generics have a very high upfront investment. They have too many players trying to do the same product. And even during timelines of FDA approval, or even if FDA approval comes, so FDA approval many a times gets delayed because FDA wants more and more data, because it's a complex product. They are not convinced that you have the right product. You have to give them more and more data, which again increases the cost also. But then even after you get approval, to get market share from the innovator is also that much more difficult, because that product is very meaningful to the innovator. So he wouldn't let you just take market share for the sake of it. They would fight back. And there's a lot of variables therefore involved in the complex generic supply chain for the Indian companies. On the other hand, what we have seen globally now, majority of the players, including Indian companies and US generic companies and European generic companies, they don't want to do this plain vanilla tablet capsule business, the very ordinary business, because they say that the margins there are not lucrative, or whatever it is. Now the point is, the moment you have supply contracting, because these larger players are going out of these ordinary products, so the supply is contracting in the ordinary products. Now pharma in export market is a commodity business, and in a commodity, if the demand is flat and if your supply contracts, the pricing improves.
Yes.
So this is what the thesis was when we launched the fund back in 2018, and I think that has played out so well, so far very well. So we have seen smaller pharma companies, because smaller pharma companies in India don't have the deep pockets to do that very high R&D to create complex generics. So they are not doing that space at all. What they're doing is they're spending very low amounts on R&D and coming out with these plain vanilla generic products like tablets, capsules, and they are being successful there. So there's no FDA issue. There is a smaller, simpler plants, so US FDA doesn't mind those plants operating. And then you have fast approvals, because there is not much data that FDA requires to approve that product. And when you go to the market, there are fewer players than there were earlier, because some of the larger players don't want to sell the product anymore. So everything is getting completely aligned in that supply chain. So which is why the smaller companies are having a better time compared to the larger companies when it comes to the US.
Is this short tenure in nature, or how long this can last?
Yeah, so to me it seems that for the next 3 to 5 years this should go on, because once you stop manufacturing a product, say if you are a large pharma company and you decided you don't want to do tablets, so you stop manufacturing tablets. Then you have to delist your ANDA from the US FDA, which you do that because otherwise you have to keep paying for the ANDA. Since you're not marketing it, you don't want to pay for the ANDA, so you will delist it. Now, once you delist it, to again start manufacturing and to list the ANDA, it's a 3 to 5 year process. So therefore, even if immediately the larger players realized that this is a good market and I need to come back to the market, they will take 3 to 5 years to come back to the market.
Okay.
So at least 3 to 5 years is the tenure.
It's a 3 to 5 year opportunity for the smaller players.
At the least.
Okay.
At the least. If the big players decide they have to come back to the space.
Okay.
On the other hand, if the big players decide that they still don't want to be in the space, then it's a much longer opportunity.
Okay.
It can last for 10, 15, 20 years.
Okay.
So depends on that.
Oh, okay. Another question is like now everybody is talking about the biosimilars.
Right.
Like how big is this market and could you please throw some light on it?
Sure. So the global biologic market is about $150 billion, and out of that, US alone is $60 billion. And the biosimilar market will basically try to tap this market size. Now, biosimilars have certain challenges which the small molecules or the normal chemical drugs that we talk about, they don't have those challenges. For instance, in chemical drugs, I can prove as a scientist that my drug is exactly the same as the other drug, and therefore, if the doctor writes the prescription for the other drug, the pharmacist can give my drug in case of that prescription.
True.
In biosimilars, the challenge is to prove that my drug is exactly the same as the other drug.
Okay.
So, which is why it's called a biosimilar.
Okay.
Because it's similar, but it's not exactly the same.
Not exactly.
So in that case, what happens is the pharmacist cannot automatically switch the prescription.
Okay.
So if doctor writes X product, the pharmacist is bound to give the X product.
Oh.
And which is why the penetration of biosimilars has been very, very low compared to the generic penetration, which is extremely high.
Okay.
So give you a data point, let's say if there is a drug X and there is a generic launched, in a month's time, 90% market share goes to generic because the generic pricing is 10% of the X drug.
Okay.
But let's say if there's a biologic X and there is a biosimilar launched, then the market share move between 1 month is like 1 or 2%.
Okay. So the brand recall would be higher here.
Brand recall is higher. The doctor isn't sure whether it is the same product or not.
Confidence.
The pharmacist cannot switch the prescription. There are many, many hurdles. And biosimilars are extremely expensive to develop because they're complex to make and they're a very difficult type of biology required to make that product. So it's a good opportunity, but the point is it's not going to play out in a very fast and firm fashion. There will be a lot of variability in the story and there will be a lot of variables that will keep changing as we go along. So it's an interesting story to watch, but maybe just not the right time to put all your eggs in that basket yet.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Aditya. Thanks for giving us this opportunity again.
Always a pleasure.